Welcome to No Hack Snacks, a series of short interviews with experimenters, optimizers, marketers, and product builders from all over the world. In this one, I talked to Manuel Krähe, digital growth and CRO expert and founder of notion.ch. We talked about best practices, and he delivered one of the best quotes in No Hacks history, so listen to the episode to get that. And also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to get more videos like this in the future, and to be the first to know about the exclusive No Hacks Season 3 giveaway that is going to start later this week. Manuel, I have a question for you. Are UX best practices a good starting point for experimentation?
No. In my opinion, they're not.
Should we end it right there?
Why
are they not?
So a lot of people love them and think they're great for CRO, especially as a starting point and everything. I do only agree 50%. So where I do agree is that I think they're a great starting point. Starting point, though, to start digging into your data. A lot of people misuse them as a starting point, and then starting point to fill their backlog, copy ideas, just take them one to one. Oh, this has worked there. Let's test that. Let's test that. Let's test that. And I think this is very wrong because CRO is driven by the individuality of each website, of your website, of your data, of your customers. And it's the exact opposite of what best practices are. Best practices are what works on average for most of people, for many things. So how I use best practices is to, let's say, take a concept, go into your GA or whatever analytics software you have, and then see if you can see a trend that's similar on your data. And then based on that, form a hypothesis that maybe work on, that you can maybe test on your data. But not just take a best practice and just run with it and test.
No, absolutely. And like you said, use it as a starting point for something. Basically, the way you use ChatGPT these days, like it will generate some kind of concept of an idea, and then you need to work with that and make it into a real thing. Same thing with best practices. Yes, those are things that you need to check. Like this is what normally works, and use it as a starting point. GA4, user service, whatever. Just get any data that's from your website. Also, how do you feel about those, swipe files with best ideas where you comment below and say swipe and they give you a swipe file of, you know what I'm talking about on LinkedIn?
I think it's terrible.
I agree with you 100%. And let me just add, you have a database of things that worked at a certain point for a certain website. How many of those things that worked are pre-pandemic when, digital life was different?
Like, very good point. I was actually gonna make that point as well in general. And yeah, to answer your question first, yeah, almost all of them. But I think that's also one big drawback about best practice in general. Best practices need a certain time to become a best practice. So they're always outdated. Very rarely you have a best practice that is very new. So there's some things that stand obviously the test of time and just work because people get used to it. It becomes a custom, and then you have certain patterns in behavior and UX that take over. But generally, they're always outdated. And
that's a great quote. Best practices are almost always outdated. That is exactly what it is. That's the title of the episode, by the way. That's what it's going to be, because it is like that. So instead of finding a checklist of best practices written 7 years ago by someone working on a different website with a different audience, how should you approach the start of your experimentation journey?
So I think if you have a list that you kind of need to start with, then start filtering that and match it to what you currently already know, just based on your experience on your audience. What do you know about them? And think, okay, these could be relevant. And then use this as a point, really dive into the analytics. Maybe you have some hard analytics, or you have some customer research you can dive into, some customer feedback, some questionnaires you've been doing, and just combine all that. And then based on that, the most important thing to do now is just, and everyone's going to tell you that, start with a proper hypothesis.
So how do you do that? Let's explain.
So the easiest thing is people skip that step because then, it's obvious. Oh, I'm testing a new header. I don't need a hypothesis. The problem with that is, unless you really take your time to do it, you don't have a good testing case because you're not actually researching something. And it kind of just the fact of making sure you always have a proper hypothesis keeps you thinking like of actually, okay, am I actually testing something that I think has a good effect? And how to do that is literally just, take some template out there and keep you reusing that so you memorize it, and then keep thinking also in your head always like, okay, what am I actually hypothesizing here? Do I have a good taste? Would it be interesting to do it this way? Does it make sense?
A lot. And also a big part of making a hypothesis and running a test is, how do I know this was a success? Like, this is how you should start, because if you don't have that, like, how will I know this was successful? You will make it up as you go, and you will convince yourself or your stakeholders that it was a success. And you don't want to do that. Like, long term, that's just a horrible, horrible strategy that will drag you to the bottom. So yeah, you start with a hypothesis and then you run the test, and what happens next? Let's say it failed. What's your strategy? Do you dive deeper? Do you move to the next one?
Very good question. I do the rinse and repeat. So if you have a hypothesis why it failed or why it didn't, yes, run it again, change something, hypothesize why it failed, and then what would have to be different in order to make it better. If you don't, so the issue is tests that I don't know why it failed, and also when I dive into data, I don't find anything. These are the ones I usually leave to not continue. So I'm going to make notes. I'm going to make a learnings report and write down why I didn't find anything or what are the questions that are staying open. And then sometimes from time to time, let's say after a yearly review, I go back to these and kind of see if anything has changed, or do I get some further input on why this might become interesting again in a different case. But generally, like, no, because even though there could be some value there, it's usually a waste of time to just digging into it, and there's not much there.
Especially if there's something else that you know needs attention.
Exactly.
Now, I'll play the client here. I just saw a competitor that do something else. Let's call it the best practice. Let's call it whatever. I want you to test this on my website right now. What's your response to that?
If you're my client.
Yep. Or a potential client or whatever. You decide.
Well,
you decide.
First thing I'm asking is why. Usually,
that's a great question.
Yeah, yep. Someone says, I want zeros. Okay, why? Maybe they have a great question. Maybe they say, we hear this all the time from our customers, or unless, usually there's a good reasons behind it. Unless it says, the management wants to.
Usually it's someone sitting on a train and they were scrolling another website and they saw something that they thought was a great idea, and they want that. So let's say that's the case.
Yeah, then I'm like, okay, then let's see why that might be a good idea. And then I'm kind of helping them to kind of find the right process themselves by showing them, okay, let's see if there is something. I'm helping them. Let's have a look at your data. Does anything suggest that this is an issue? And then usually they find it themselves and see, oh yeah, no, that's true. Actually, people behave this way on a website. That's not just, like when they find out themselves on like how I usually do my process, then they kind of understand my reasoning and they're like, oh yeah, that's right.
So in a way, you're trying to guide them into realizing that that is not the best way of handling
exactly.
this.
Because usually just trying to convince your client, oh, you're wrong, or this is not true, it's not going to work. So you kind of have to make them realize that,
great point.
I will come to the conclusion.
Excellent point. Usually it's not going to work. Also, next conversation you have with that client is going to be less pleasant and less pleasant and less pleasant, and then it's end of contract. If you are kind of working with them and guiding them into realizing what the best way is, love that. And I'll just say it again, best practices are almost always out of date. Manuel, thank you so much for the interview.
Thank you.